Yeah, so before I get into what I'm about to get into, it will be, I guess, which will be something a bit of a high order, a big vision and idea. So, my brothers in Serbia and some of the brothers that I have in Russia, who've been my eyes and ears, if anybody makes a move on my girl, if anybody attempts to move on my girl, make it known that they are not walking on thin ice. They are dangling from a rope, and underneath that rope is a hole cut out of thin ice, and that I can simply flick and they'll be dropped in. And for anybody who feels that they can disrespect her while not being a friend or acquaintance, just know there are eyes and ears that you do not see. I need to walk in peace. I don't want silly distractions. Right? And there are some people who are extremists. Right? And I'm not. Diplomacy is best. So please, respect me, respect her. Thank you. Now, going into what I am going to go into. Now, I thought that I was going to go and talk about history, about how there was the monarch state, and after the monarch state, some British went to America, and there they established a democratic state, and from there, after the African colonization, they sort of like imposed democracy onto Africa, which didn't really fit very well. Now, a lot of people wonder why. A lot of people think it's because the Western powers still hold too much power over Africa, in way of the trade agreements that cater more to the West than they do to the Africans, to the African countries. And of course, there's also that thing about a lot of African citizens who are not fully aware of the power that democracy gives them, right? Like how far the power to vote goes, how the rule of law should protect them from certain things, because there are still things like religious laws which impose on democratic rules of law, and this basically always leads to conflict. Those are the countries where the rule of law hasn't fully been implemented, and this has to do with a lack of pragmatism from the leaders, right? Because most of them are religious, and there is that sort of blasphemous stone to go against the religious laws or whatever, as bad as some of them are. And this creates a problem for everybody, right? This creates a problem where some countries are too hostile, and there's no real trade there. Industries don't grow, so the countries are not progressing. The citizens don't feel safe. The citizens are fleeing the countries. Look at Zimbabwe. They've had a dictator forever. They keep making excuse after excuse after excuse for him. But his time has been over for a really long time now. He should have been a symbolic leader, a leader that they go to for counsel. But instead, this walking zombie, I don't know if this walking mummy is the president, right? And he's created so much chaos, and African countries keep on making excuses for him because of the past triumph that he has. And a lot of African countries keep making excuses for him because of the relationships that they had way back when they were fighting the colonizers. But at the moment, the present lives should be the lives, they should be the lives that are more important than the lives that have anyway, past expiration. So basically now Mugabe's wife is the president of Zimbabwe, and that's just the truth. She tells him what to do. I noticed this. There was the time when it was a test. People didn't know that it was a test, and what happened was it ended up with Mugabe and Grace going to South Africa to try and establish trade agreements and whatnot. Mugabe himself would not have done this, and the fact that he hadn't been in South Africa since '94 is testament to this. It was Grace's idea, and that's what I needed to prove that sort of theory that I had, that she dictates him and he in turn dictates the people, because he wants to live a peaceful life at home. Nagging wife who might just suffocate you in your sleep, and you're 91. What will you do? Fight back? Yeah. So yeah, I respect the past Mugabe. I don't respect the current Zimbabwe. I think he is a disgrace to his own legacy. He is a disgrace to Africa. He is a disgrace to progress. And the sooner he's gone, the better it will be for all of us. Why I'm saying this is, in order for us to have efficient, effective, safe trade agreements, trade routes, all of the SADC countries need to be safe. And countries cannot be safe if they have political hostility. That means democracy and the rule of law is not fully implemented. Right? So let me get back to why I was going to talk about the history of the monarch state, democracy and such. I think everybody is familiar with the so-called New World Order, right? A lot of people have added a lot of folklore to it. Bush is an alien, and Queen Elizabeth, them are also aliens, lizard people, all sorts of rubbish. No, that's not what it was about. What it was about. What the world order was about was basically alliance. It was about alliance, so that the world countries would have alliances together, right? So that they could solve the world's problems together. A new world order. Get it? So the proposal that I'm going to put forth now, and this is because in my last video I said, I think I said Obama should do something about the Syria war, which is kind of unfair, because Putin still hasn't come to the front. He hasn't come to the front and come to the front completely honest. He hasn't come to the front completely honest so that the violence can end. You know, kids are dying, and we can't have this. So Obama can do what he can do, but Putin also has to do what he can do, and it will be everybody's history. I think Putin doesn't want to come to the front because he believes it will seem like it's America's victory. So, you know, I say give him all the credit that he wants, you know, have his ego up there if that's what he needs. As long as, you know, in the end, we do the right thing. And because of that, there's one thing that hasn't been thought of. It's very futuristic. There are some countries in the world that have something in common, and that something is democracy, right? And having democracy, we don't have democratic alliances. Democratic alliances would be looking at democratic countries, looking at how they practice democracy, whether it is practiced well, and if it's, you know, and if it's a real democracy, they can then be signed up to the allies of democracy. Now, this group of countries, the allies of democracy, remember I said democracy, the allies of democracy, I guess you could say it's almost like the UN, the way the UN works, but it's different because it's about governments. The allies of democracy would then have a channel, direct channels with each other, whereby they will be able to assist each other, right, and apply grants where they are needed to strengthen the other ally democratic countries. What this will do after some time, after some years, if it's successful, right, the countries in the democratic alliance, they will obviously thrive, right? They will thrive. And what's more, they won't be like, you know, you have America, and then you have Australia, that's part of the Democratic Alliance, and then you have South Africa, and then you have Namibia. So there's no category like first world, second world, third world, none. So when these democratic alliances come together and they speak on issues of the world, right, issues and things like global warming can become a world problem when a lot of democratic alliances come to the front and say, you know, let's solve this. And the other benefit of this, because it also ties in with my idea that I'm having, and it's still evolving, and I'll still have more things about it, which is about conflict resolution. The countries that are not democratic at the moment, they will at some point want to join the Democratic Alliance. But in order for them to join the Democratic Alliance, they will have to adhere to the conditions set by the Democratic Alliance. And these conditions, most of which are pro-peace, pro-progress, and pro-collaboration, right? So if they want to join the Democratic Alliance, then they have to adhere to that. Of course, there can be negotiations about, at the moment certain things cannot be done, but then there is also a deadline. Like, if you don't fix this issue by this time, then you're cancelled. Then you go to the second phase, where it gets even harder to join the Democratic Alliance, where you have to adhere to even more strict conditions, right? So a lot of countries would want to join the Democratic Alliance, because what it doesn't do is assign a super leader, right? Like we have in the UN, where you have the really powerful countries and the not so powerful countries. No, completely balanced, just like you would have in a parliament, where each member or each country's vote is just as important as the next one. So when issues are discussed and things are brought forward, everybody actually has a role to play. This will empower small nations as well. The idea of a democratic alliance is basically an idea of trying to unify the world. Now, democratic alliance, of course, and we have communist countries who won't easily bend towards some of the conditions. So what are the special provisions that can be made for those countries? Well, the first thing is, we don't really have communist countries, at least big powerful ones, any longer. China is sort of a communist country, but they are not communist in the traditional sense. They are not. So the other benefit of this democratic alliance is they would also have to adhere, right, to global standard set trade agreements, because as we have it now, we don't have rules on trade, and it's like the one that leads on trade would be the winner, but that doesn't last long, right? Eventually that does sort of corrode. It means when the leader in trade isn't doing so well, the rest suffer. But when you have a democratic alliance which sets up global standard trade rules, it means even if one is suffering, it doesn't completely affect the rest, and in turn the rest can also grant the suffering country or countries for a time being until they are good again and they can pay back. It's a lot of institutions into one thing, of course, but mostly is it will be very attractive to a lot of countries, and it will be very beneficial to a lot of smaller countries, to also empower them to gain the maximum from what they have, because most countries are rich with minerals but not financially, economically. And if you're not in the Democratic Alliance, if you decide to exile yourself, right, it would almost be like the situation where the Reich, I think it was the Third Reich, where they segregated themselves until they couldn't sustain themselves anymore, and they had to try and conquer other countries to gain more power, as well as more things, more things that they need to sustain themselves. So if you isolate yourself from that group, you're in a lot of trouble. So in the end, just the existence of this body, of this huge world project, it would change a lot of things. It would change how we handle conflict resolution. It will change how we trade, how in some instances you have big money organizations that are taking from the little people unfairly, who cannot be called to order because those smaller countries don't have that power, right? So it's progressive. It's about saving for the next generation. And in order for that to happen, we all have to be involved. And I think even Russia would eventually want to be a part of something like this. Right? I know they are a communist state, but like I said, there are provisions. And these provisions will not only be good for Russia the country, but for Russia the citizens. And it's a case whereby necessity forces you to kneel. Necessity. As opposed to what has been done a lot in the world, where it has been force used as a weapon. I've just had this idea. I'll listen to it later and see what I can add, and